I got my start in newspapers real briefly while we still watch some people trickle in. I got my start in newspapers. I went online back in the mid 1990s, and I was the editor-in-chief of livescienceandspace.com, and roundabout way ended up here. Today, I will be talking about best practices for doing well-researched, credible, useful, and engaging science and health writing. I won't focus on pure personal narratives. That's a great content type, but it's a separate thing. It's not what I specialize in. If you've got questions, please put them in the chat. I would like to avoid using the chat for questions about writing for either of my publications or anything like that. Let's keep it focused on the talk and the topic at hand. And if you have other questions for me, go to the publications and check out the submission guidelines if you're interested in that. Or shoot me an email later if we don't get to the question that you have. I'm at rob.britt@gmail.com. So let's get started. All right, I'm Rob, and we're going to talk about writing successful, well-researched health and science articles on Medium. This is not about writing personal essays. Okay, that's a separate topic. I'm not the guy to help you with that. I have a background in journalism, and while your anecdotes and perspectives can be and should be woven into good health and science writing, that's great. I just want you to know what we're going to talk about today and what we're not. So I teach how to get beyond just talking about yourself in order to elevate your credibility and reach a wider audience. That's the hope. These are strategies and tactics that I've taken from traditional journalism and mainstream media, both news and feature writing, and I've adapted them to serve Medium readers well. My approach is not the only one, but it is definitely a proven way to build a following. And I know this from a lot of data and experience that these strategies and tactics that I'm going to talk about, they work. So I teach these things when I edit my publications, and I teach them via my Substack newsletter. So again, there's links at the top if you want to go to any of those. My goal is to help other writers improve their craft. I'm late in my career, and this is what I love doing. And I do it always for the benefit of readers. My philosophy is that if we put readers first, if we serve them and respect them, we'll do our best work to create a sustainable career. So let's dive in. I want to talk about some very basic concepts and tactics first. And question, can't copy text for links out of chat. You should be able to type. Yeah, I see other people typing into the chat. Okay, so I want to talk about some basic elements of a good story before we get into specifics of science and health writing. You need a compelling headline, obviously. The headline has one job, and that's to get readers to click. But it must be honest, no trickery, okay? Short and clear is often the best. A subject, an object, a subject, verb, an object, maybe an adjective. Long headlines can be great, but not all of us are great at writing headlines, and a long headline needs to be long for a reason. Being clever is hard, so if you can be short and straightforward, most of us will tend to have more success. I actually have written about this on Medium, and I'll put that in the link here in the chat. Next, you need a complementary subtitle. This may seem obvious, but I see a lot of people not doing it. The subtitle right underneath the headline has to complement the headline, not repeat it. Pull a nugget out of the story, something else that's interesting about the story, and close the deal. You got the headline, you got the subtitle and the image. That's all people are going to see in many cases when they decide whether to read your story or not. You need a clear top. I consider the first 4 to 5 graphs to be sort of the top of most stories. Your lead is your first sentence usually. Sometimes it's delayed, but you need to get to the point. You've got maybe 30 words or at the most to convince readers to read your story from the beginning sentence. So, like, what are your first 5 words? Do they say something? Do they matter? Are they important? Or are they just something for readers to, click off and say, yeah, this isn't for me? Make those first words count, and get a lot into that first sentence. I actually wrote a little bit about this. Also in that top, most stories need a good solid nut graph, and that's somewhere in the first 3 to 5 paragraph that solidifies the engagement of the readers. They've come in, they're interested in your story, but now you need to spell out exactly what's ahead, the focus of the story, and why it matters. You're not giving up all the details here. You're just making sure that readers know where we're headed. That's the nut graph. I write about some of that stuff here. Just put it in the chat. An outline, a strong outline is really important. It organizes your story for you and for the reader. I like to see actual subheads at the breaks. It's a visual break for the reader. You can use that subhead to entice the reader forward. Think of it as a mini headline. You don't need a ton of them, 3 or 4 in a typical story, maybe 5 or 6 in a really long story. Let's shift now to specifically talking about health and science writing. And again, I'm going to move quickly. If you have any questions about this, put them in the chat. Accuracy is paramount with health and science writing. Obviously, that's true with any writing, but with health writing, as an example, you can kill people. If you talk glowingly about some therapy or a drug or a procedure or a technique or whatever, and it doesn't live up to this, wonderful way that you've pitched it, somebody could die. So we've got to be accurate and we've got to be honest when we're writing about health and science. With science, it's really easy to explain something incorrectly if you don't really, really know the topic. So make sure you know your topic, make sure you've done the research, be accurate. And this is really hard. It takes time. I mean, I'll spend 10, maybe 20 hours on a lot of the stories that I publish, my own stories. Not always, and sometimes more. It's not an easy craft. Secondly, be credible. And again, this seems obvious, but who are you? Are you an expert? Are you a conduit for the experts? Do you do interviews? How much do you actually know about your topic? Are you credible? I encourage people to find an area of focus. I mean, if you focus enough on a topic on Medium and write about it often enough, you can publish a book based on your Medium writings. So really dig into, stay in your lane. You can have 2 lanes, you can have 3 lanes, whatever, but, don't expect to be an expert in business writing and health writing and technology writing. And, find an even narrower, find a topic area and become an expert. And interview the experts. Get out there and really dig into the research and make sure that you're credible. Avoid cheerleading. This goes back to the first point about accuracy and honesty and integrity. You can't be cheerleading especially for health topics. I mean, you can, but you need to be really careful. It's great to have enthusiasm, but don't say something is the best if it's not absolutely the best. Is there scientific research to support that statement? Science never proves anything. It generates associations and likelihoods, and sometimes comes very close to proving it. Sometimes it may seem obvious to us, but you got to be careful with your words if you want to be credible. I mentioned doing your own research. Get beyond your personal perspective. Go to the source, whether it's books or research papers, institutions, .orgs, the actual scientists. Understand the research that you cite. Don't just be saying, oh, well, this study said, and that study said. And when I see a story that has a lot of study said, I'm thinking the writer probably didn't really dig into this stuff and figure out what these studies actually say. And studies don't always say much. Sometimes they say things that are wrong. So to show that you've actually looked at these studies, and please do, include citations and attributions. Mention what journal it was published in, the institution that was behind the research, quote a researcher, quote from the study, understand the material that you're citing. Next up, be skeptical. And this is not about, being a wholesale, distrusting everything, in a wholesale way. This is about not accepting studies or surveys or other facts at face value. You got to look into them and see, are they accurate? Where do they come from? Who's behind them? Be careful about cause and effect in a study versus associations. So the majority of studies that you'll run across if you're a health reporter have linkages and associations, not cause and effects, not proof. So you got to be careful about your wording, and you got to be skeptical about the studies that you're citing. Are there other studies out there that refute the thing that you're citing? Don't just find a study and go, oh, well, I found this study. I mean, what else is out there, right? That could be one study that says this works, and there's 10 other studies that say this doesn't work. Who funded the study? If you're, a candy company funds a study about how chocolate is good for you, don't write the story or don't include that study. I mean, just don't. Broaden your search. look for research that supports or refutes the key points that you're trying to make. All right. And I actually, here, I'm going to give you this link in the chat. I wrote specifically about skepticism in writing there. That's in the chat. Avoid jargon, please. If you're going to write about health and science, you will be dealing with probably more jargon than just about any other topic. But like, you're trying to reach readers who don't necessarily have the same vocabulary as you, don't understand all these terms. Don't make assumptions about what words and terms other people really understand. And the trick to that is write conversationally. Read your story back to yourself or have Medium read it to you. And listen, does this sound like you? Does it sound like anybody? Get that jargon, either take it out if you don't need it, or explain it, define it when it comes up. All this is about separating yourself from, all the other bloggers out there. You want to be among the best, right? You want to advance your career. You want to build your following. So don't take the easy way out. Don't crib from .coms. I don't care what CNN said or the New York Times said or whatever. I can go read that there. If you're going to write something new and unique and go to the original sources, not to the .coms. Citing .coms, while there are times when it makes sense, there are exceptions. For the most part, in health and science writing, is a sign of lack of effort on the part of the writer, and probably an article that, hey, I can go find this somewhere else. Likewise, stay out of the echo chambers, please, of the podcasters and the YouTubers who seem to be experts on everything. Nobody's an expert on everything. Make sure that the people that you're quoting are experts in the thing that you're writing about and the thing that they're talking about. They're not just like in their echo chamber bringing guests on who say the same things and they all compliment each other, and then you spew it, and now everybody's saying the same thing, and we don't even know like what the original source was. Do the hard work. Go direct to the sources, and you might be surprised. You might find that what you thought was true isn't actually the case. Finally, I want to circle back to some real writing basics that apply very much to health and science writing also, and that is, what is your hook? What's the point of your story? What's the special angle about your article compared to the hundreds or thousands or millions of other articles on the same topic? What makes it more than a Wikipedia-like reference article? We don't need those on Medium. We have Wikipedia for that. We don't need everything you need to know about X. That's a reference article, and Medium readers like stories. We know that. What's the new thing or the surprising thing or the big myth or that needs debunking? What are you bringing to the table that's special? I mean, okay, so you saw another study, big deal. Everybody else saw it. All the journalists and the health writers and the science writers are scouring the press releases and the journal sites, and they're seeing the same studies. Do you have a special anecdote, a historical fact, a little known aspect to this thing? I like to ask yourself with every story, why this article right now by you? That will serve you really well in all your writing, and especially in health and science writing, I believe. It's about you bringing something to this article that everybody else hasn't brought to the topic already. Reflect all these things, all your main point and your purpose of the article and the reason people, reflect all that in the headline, the subtitle, the lead, the nut graph, the outline, and the through line that you carry through the article so that people continue to be reminded of why they're reading this article. All right, I'm going to go and turn to some questions now. And let me go back up. If you have questions, type them in there. Here's a question from David. What have you learned from examples of yourself or colleagues getting snowed by, say, charismatic surgeons or scientists with unusual claims, but for which communication challenges, different cultural, linguistic backgrounds obscured the path to clarity? Wow, that's a lot. I go back to skepticism. Don't trust what anybody says at face value. Now, if you're talking to the expert in a particular topic, she's well respected. You perhaps have followed them before, you've read their book, on and on and on. You develop over time a level of trust with certain scientists or experts, doctors, whatever. And you may find with others, like, I don't know if I trust this person. So have your antenna up, your bullshit antenna, your skeptic's hat, and you have to go into each when you're citing a new source or a new study, you've got to make these evaluations sort of from scratch. But over time, if you stay in your lane, if you focus on a topic, you can find sources that you might want to go back to again and again because they're reliable, because they say things that are accurate, insightful, and so forth. David, I'm not sure I fully answered your question. If I didn't, feel free to email me, rob.britt@gmail.com. I'm happy to answer any questions any of you might have afterwards or anytime. A question from Minka. I take that as a scientific form of writing. We should include our works cited. How should we cite things? That's a big question, and I've written about it in the Writer's Guide, but I think it's behind a paywall. But attribution and citations are tremendously important. When I see a story, again, that just says study says, study says, study says, I don't think the writer's done the work. Or they don't have respect for the science and the scientists and the scientific process enough to give credit where credit is due. And so it's a kind of a two-sided answer from my perspective. One is giving credit where it's due. These scientists work their tails off. And imagine you're a scientist and you've worked for a year or 10 years or your whole life to create this wonderful paper. And then you go and you see some blogger or a bunch of journalists or whomever writes about it, and they don't even mention your name. They don't mention the journal that it was in. There's going to be times when you need to just say study says on a minor point, or maybe it's even just a link from keywords in a story to a reference page about more on that topic. Fine. But the key studies that you cite, the key points that you make, give some credit where credit's due. That builds your credibility as a writer. And I know sometimes readers will skim over that. I'll do it too. I'll go, okay, yeah, so-and-so. But the credibility is there, even if I, as a reader, skim over it. It's like, okay, the writer took the time to name the journal, give me a link to it. I can go there for more information. They quoted from the journal, or they talked to the scientist. Great, that's even better. Journalists, this is what we do. I hope that answers your question, Minka. Christy says, how do you handle requests from friends or others who want you to write a review? Don't do it. No, public reviews for friends, it depends on context. On Amazon for a book, if you really know the person, you're not supposed to do that. They have rules against it, so you have to be careful. Reviews, I think I could talk about this endlessly, but I think it's a little beyond the topic of this conversation. So Christy, send me an email. Tracy says, writing health-related topics as a deaf person often opposes what mainstream wants. So how do I present without people shutting off? That's a great question. I work with some writers who have various mental health conditions. One of the writers I've worked with is deaf. And from a writing perspective and an editing perspective, I don't know that a whole lot different needs to be done other than bring your experiences to your writing. If you have, that's what Medium is all about, right? Lived experience. So whatever experience you have, bring it to your writing. Now, you need to determine your target audience. Maybe this is the direct answer to your question. Are you writing for other deaf people? Are you writing for other people who have the condition that you have? That's going to generate one type of story, one way of communicating. If you want other people to hear you, it's going to be different. And it's going to, maybe you're going to write hey, I need all you non-deaf people to hear this and understand what's going on. So write for them. Pick your target audience. Don't try to write for both. Maybe you can sometimes, but that's really difficult. Claire says, I write for a lot of poetry and creative content on Medium, but I'm a health content writer in my other life. I've been tackling more complex topics. Yes, I feel like a little stuck in the middle somewhere. Claire feels a little stuck between poetry and creative writing and health writing. I've written fiction. I've published some novels, and it is kind of two worlds. Writing is writing, but I think a person can do both. You probably won't do them in the same place, and you certainly, maybe you will on Medium, but you certainly won't get the same, you won't be targeting them at the same audiences. And this is a challenge on Medium. I've built a following, a big chunk of my following was built during COVID because I wrote almost daily about COVID. I wrote a lot about COVID going back to February, March of 2020, right at the beginning. And so a lot of my followers came during that year or two. And they're not all interested when I write about depression or running or whatever else. And so I already have a, you know, a bit of a disconnect with some of those. Now, if I was to publish a fiction piece on Medium and send it out to my following, they'd be like, what? So I think that I might want to do, if I was going to write some more fiction, I'd probably do it somewhere else. Hope that helps. Fiona says, do you recommend focusing on a specific niche when starting as a new writer, or having a broad range of topics and experiment with them? I think both is good, but when you say, you know, how narrow is narrow, how specific is niche? Exercise is pretty specific niche. You know, I wouldn't focus just on running unless that's all I wanted to write about. Then great, but you're going to narrow your potential following if you just write about running. But if you write about exercise, that's a big pie, right? That's a big pie with a lot of slices. So you can do a lot in exercise. Go out to health more broadly, which is what I do. And, you know, there's many things that you can write about. Now, I'm going to garner on a weekly, monthly basis writers who might be interested in this, but not that, depression, but not exercise, and or the connection between them, which is what I really like to do. So there's no right answer, but I've been doing this for more than 30 years, and I write about both health and general science. And it's tricky because my general science stuff doesn't find an audience as easily, because a lot of my followers expect health writing out of me, because that's what I did for the first 4 years that I was writing on Medium. So be careful to pick a lane that's wide enough for you to enjoy and have fun and you know, experiment, but narrow enough that readers come to know what to expect from you. I think that's really important. Let's see. John Mark says, how much work do you put into custom illustrations and graphics? Not much. I used to a lot more. I do create, I actually started in journalism as an infographic artist. So I have skills in creating charts and tables. I'm not much of an illustrator, so I don't try to do that, but I love to create a good bar chart that shows the information better than words can. But I don't do it as much as I should now, because I no longer have Adobe Illustrator, because it's become really expensive. So I do it in other programs. It's a little more cumbersome, and I don't do some of the more creative graphics that I'd like to do. But if you have those skills, man, go for it. Graphics are fantastic. Don't do graphics in lieu of words, but where you can explain something better in a graphic and keep the words tight, I think that's fantastic. Let's see. I think we're getting close to running out of questions. If I missed your question, put it in there again, because I'm scrolling back up and I might have missed one. So type me another quick one and I will get to it. And again, to any of you who might have just joined, send me an email later if you have additional questions, rob.britt@gmail.com. I saved one more thing in case we had a little time at the end. And that is how to end a story. So the quick version, there's no right or wrong way, but don't try too hard. I see people trying so hard to come up with a clever ending that, you know, clever ends up being cute or stupid or off key or whatever. And good writers, great writers can be clever. We're not all clever. Be careful not to try too hard with your endings. And unless your story is like 5,000 words or more, no summaries. We don't need a summary at the ending. We just read the story. You know, if it's a 4-minute read or even an 8-minute read, I just read it. What do I need a summary for? And especially don't say, here's a summary. Or it's a kind of an academic technique. We don't need that in writing for lay audiences and in shorter stories. You can, you know, a great way to end a story is with a quote, maybe some next steps, perhaps a surprise fact that you held back. That doesn't hurt the story by keeping it for the end. It's a zinger, and it maybe sort of shoots the reader's mind off into a new direction. Have a little fun, right? Or circle back to the beginning. That's a real common technique. And sometimes I write the beginning knowing what the ending is going to be. Or every now and then I'll write the ending knowing what the beginning might be. So you know, you might refer to your I don't know, your grandmother's Great Dane, and you were always afraid that the dog was going to knock her over. This is a true story for me. And at the end, you know, you could circle back and say, grandma's fine. that sort of thing. That was a terrible example, but you get my drift. Let's see. Oh, and I actually have a link here to how to write endings. And I think, yeah, that's on Medium also. So some of my writer's guide stories, which come out on Substack, occasionally I'll cross-post one over to Medium because I think it'll be helpful to writers on Medium. Minka says, I like to end on something uplifting for the reader. Yeah, that's great. Everyone has rough times, so I slip a little positive message into my outro. I love that. Yeah, there's a million ways to, but wrap it up, just like this talk needs to end in 3 minutes. Maybe we'll end it sooner. Let's just end it. Let's not go on and on. I think, to be all honest, I am done. I see a thank you in there. Hey, listen, this was great. Thank you all for showing up. I don't know, what I'd love to hear is, can you guys see me? Because this functionality is strange and I am just not sure. Yes, okay, thank you for that. I can't see any of you. I probably set it up wrong. Check out the publications. The link is at the top of the chat if you want to do that. If my publications aren't right for you, or if I say, yeah, you're not right for me, which I do, I turn away 19 out of 20 prospective writers because the fit just isn't right and I only have so much time. I edit all of, I wasn't planning on doing this, so feel free to check out right here. I edit all of the articles that go on my publications. I edit them professionally and thoroughly. I spend anywhere from half an hour to an hour on most of them. And I give a lot of feedback to the writers. It takes a lot of my time, and I also like to do some writing. So when a writer just hasn't quite crossed the bar to where I think I can help them, I'll say no thanks, or at least not now. But check out the submission guidelines on either of the publications. They're pretty clear. And if my publications don't work out for you, find another publication that will. And if you can find somebody who actually edits your stories and offers suggestions, not demands, they don't say it has to be my way or the highway, at least not very often. That's great. Having an editor is so huge. If you don't have an editor, final tip, find a friend. Have them read your story before you publish it. Don't ask them what they like about it. Ask them what they don't like about it. Ask them, what's wrong? What confused you? Is there anything in here that confused you? Put your story in a Google Doc and share it out to your friend or your relative or whomever, and let them tear it apart. What we want at that stage is heavy criticism, and then we can decide what to do with it. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to end this a few seconds early, and appreciate all of you joining. Happy writing. Right on.